Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We're beginning a new book, a new study in Ezekiel, the prophecies of Ezekiel. Um, as far as how, as a dating for Ezekiel, now one of the ways that we have been, um, looking at um, the studying the writings of the prophets, where there is what's called the old and new. I'm sorry, the minor and major prophets, and that's just a division that translators and scholars did when they translated the Bible and then arranged the books in the Bible. You know what I'm going to do? Let me do this here, and then I'll show you. But Ezekiel was a contemporary prophet of Jeremiah and Daniel. Um, in fact, let me do this. Let me bring up. Let me bring up. And for some reason, this my. Okay. Let me go back. My screen is not sharing here. Let's do it this way. All right. Now, okay. I don't know why I'm having trouble with these. Anyway, so if we look at a Bible timeline here, as you can see, and this is just a chart that I use of kind of a timeline of the Old Testament. So if you start in the term BC, so if you start at the time of Jesus and you work your way back, that's why the numbers grow. So around Jeremiah and Ezekiel, they're around the same timeline, 595 to 600, okay, in terms of as they appear in the Bible. And of course, I'm trying to think, there's something else I wanted to look at. Okay, but Ezekiel, let me go back here, because Ezekiel, the timeline of Ezekiel, or the timeline, that's what I wanted to do. Let me go back here and let me show you. Okay, what is going on here? Why my program is not working here? Okay, my programs are not switching over to sharing my screen here. Why is it doing this? All right, let's do it again. I don't know why it's doing that. All right. All right. Okay, here we go. Now, what I want to do is I want to go through, I want to kind of just, when we talk about this, so this is the Old Testament, and the Old Testament writings, the Old Testament book is broken up into, you can say, different sections. So from Genesis all the way down to Esther, as you can see here, Esther. No, that's not what I meant to do. All right, no problem. No, let me go back. From Genesis to Esther. All right. So from Genesis to Esther is the historical section. Then you have Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastics, and then Songs of Solomon, which are the books, you can say, of literature of wisdom, of songs, okay? Now, when you come to Isaiah, the way most Bibles arrange them, and this is not inspired, this is just how they arrange them. But Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel are considered what's called the major prophets. Lamentations believed to be the writings of Jeremiah. And we just completed Lamentations. But they are considered the major prophet. And then the minor prophets are Hosea all the way down to Malachi. Now, in each section of the Bible, they are arranged in what is believed to be the writing and then dating. So for example, the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, of course, they were all written by Moses. But in terms of the timeline of them, Genesis obviously would be first, talking about the beginning, then Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and all that. So when you get to Deuteronomy, at the end of Deuteronomy, you have Moses' kind of last day. So they are arranged in such a way that it is believed to be when the writings happen, okay, in terms of sections. All right. So the same thing with Job. Job actually is the oldest book in the Bible, and at best dated around the time of Abraham. And then, so when you come to the writings of the prophets, so Isaiah all the way to Malachi is the last section of the Old Testament, which would be the writings of the prophets. So then they divide this section into 2, the major and minor prophets. All right, so that's neither right or wrong here or there. However, my point is that if you want to look at it from the actual time and how we have been going through these prophets, the writings of the prophets, would be we started with Isaiah, right? And then we went to Hosea. So Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah are all um, um, pre-Babylonian exile writings. And actually, Hosea would be even before Isaiah. And the reason why I did it that way is I wanted to study the voice, see, of this about the same time. So all of these books here, if you come up to Jonah, well, let me do this. Let me go back. Let me do it this way then. So if you kind of go back, if you remember, if you go all the way back to around 8, who would be the first writings of the prophets here? Okay, so let's go down. So a timeline here, and this is how we studied these books. That's why I'm bringing this up. This is how we studied these books. So I broke them up in what is best believed the time frame in which they were written. So if you come all the way back to Obadiah, and actually I think I messed up on Obadiah because there was a controversy as to when this book was written. But Obadiah, and then notice you come down to the next minor prophet, okay? Joel, which was written around 835. And then Amos, then Jonah, then Hosea. Now watch this. Then we get to Isaiah, right? Now, all of these minor prophets, they began the prophetic voice of God warning Israel to turn from their sins. So some 250 years before the actual fall, you have God warning Israel. And then we come to Isaiah. So look at all these minor prophets here up to Hosea, right? Right? So from 853? 853 BC down to Joel, right? 835 BC. All of this, God begins to warn Israel through these prophets. Now we come to Isaiah around 739 BC. Of course, he's the major prophet, but the same voice, God is warning Israel to turn on all of these prophets here. So during the time of Isaiah, his contemporary would have been Micah, right? So all of this time here, Isaiah, and then we come to Zephaniah, who would be a contemporary of Jeremiah. Jeremiah comes on the scene, as you can see, about 23 years before the fall, right? Before the fall of Jerusalem. And then Habakkuk, right? So he's a contemporary of Jeremiah doing the siege, doing the as Nebuchadnezzar's closing in. And then, of course, with Jeremiah, you see the actual fall. At some point, you see the actual fall of Jerusalem. And so then you see, at the same time in which we get to Daniel, he's one of the first people to be deported. So now we come to Ezekiel, around 593. Now, some will put this a little later, maybe 595, closer to 600, but like I say, I'm not a scholar, so I'm not necessarily, going to debate that since I'm not a scholar. So all of this time, and we'll see this timeline sort of when we get into the book itself, Ezekiel. So so Ezekiel and Daniel around the same time. Now notice this. So after Daniel is Ezra, which was post Babylonian exile, Haggai, and then Zechariah. These are post. So then you get into Esther and all of these books, okay? Nehemiah, all of these books, and then you're going to jump to Malachi around 430 BC. So this is why I'm studying the book the way it is structured, because let's go back to Ezekiel, because I wanted to give the prophetic voice, okay? The prophetic voice. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to read the first few verses here, and then I'm going to talk more about the book itself. Verse 1 says, "In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, while I was among the exiles by the Chesapeake Canal, the heavens opened, and I saw visions of God on the 5th day of the month. It was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's exile. The word of the Lord came directly to Ezekiel, the priest, and the son of Buzi, in the land of Chaldeans by the Chesapeake Canal. And the Lord's hand was upon me there." So Ezekiel, as I said, was a contemporary of Daniel, believed to be exiled after Daniel. So he is now living along with Daniel and other Jewish exiles in the land of Babylon. So you have to kind of go back and understand when God prophesied, and all of the writing of the prophet pointed to the Babylonian exile. Ezekiel is now living in Babylon. Okay, so he's about 25-ish, okay, when he's exiled. And then there he will spend the rest of his life. Same with Daniel. Now, Jeremiah, if you remember, was left behind in the land of in Jerusalem. God had told Israel, God had told them, first and foremost, since they had rebelled. Hold on, let's see. God had told them since they rebelled. Remember, all of this time here, going all the way back to this time, God had begun to tell them, you need to repent. So 853 BC, you guys need to repent. They ignored. Joel, y'all need to repent, right? Amos. Jonah wasn't necessarily, Jonah's prophecy was about something else, but Hosea. And then we come to Isaiah, who is, again, a more serious prophecy, right? You need to repent. You need to repent. And then when we get to Jeremiah, it's like, it's really serious. You guys need to repent. You really, 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 really need to repent. And of course, Jeremiah comes along about 23 years before the fall. And then he actually sees the death of the nation. And so, um, it's of course a sad case that God warns them, like I said, about 250 years, right? And then they still just rebel. They rebel as, remember, they rebelled as the invasion was happening. And so, let me go back. Let me see. Right around Isaiah, no, at the end of Isaiah. So, let me find out where this at. Jehoiakim's right here. Around 609 is when Nebuchadnezzar closes in. Okay, he closes in. All right. So again, he closes in, and then the deportations begin. Daniel's living in Babylon at the time. Ezekiel is living in Babylon at the time, but living in two different parts, because Ezekiel probably is a common person. One of the things that God had told Israel, to those that, and there were those who obeyed, he said, first and foremost, the invasion is happening. You guys have, you're not going to get around that. Manasseh had sealed their doom, and even after that, they still would not repent. So he said, okay, it's going to happen. So then he said, if you surrender to the armies of the Chaldeans, you'll be taken captive. It will go well with you. He said, but if you do not, it is going to be very bad, brutal. So those who stayed behind, it was a brutal defeat, murder, rape, famine. But then there were those who did surrender, and then they were transported, they were deported to Israel. Ezekiel was one of those, Daniel was one of those. So while they were in Babylon, and they began, they were given such certain freedoms. Not ideal, because again, no captivity is ideal. But if you're going to be in captivity, those circumstances would have been better, because they were kind of allowed to live. They had their own communities. A lot of times they didn't care about them as long as they didn't rebel against Nebuchadnezzar. The same thing with the Romans. The Romans didn't care what God you worship, as long as you just remember who was, Lord, which is Rome. Same thing with Nebuchadnezzar. So we're going to see that Ezekiel is living among a community in exile. Okay, he's living in a community in exile. So life is as good as it could be as a captive. And that's the thing we have to look at. All right, we're going to pick this up in the next video. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. See you in the next study.